And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just a little taste of how frustrating it is for someone who can't hear like you and I can. Let's talk about how Jesus helps somebody in that situation today.
It was a solid joke too.
It was a solid joke, yeah.
Solid joke too, and they'll never know what it was.
They'll never know what it was. Never ever. How sad is that? Well, unless they can read lips or something like that. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have people who watch this who can read lips. I mean, I'm sure we have people who watch this, besides mom, right?
Yeah.
Welcome back to Help I'm Teaching Sunday School. I'm here with my brother, Paul. We're glad to have you with us again, Paul, today. Today we are in Mark chapter 7, where Jesus heals a deaf man. Mark 7, verses 31 to 37. Hey, this is the shortest one yet that we've had.
We still haven't kept it under half an hour yet.
We still haven't kept it under half an hour. We'll see if we do that this time. But let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and see what God's word has for us to say. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start with the verses?
Sure, I will.
Go for it.
Then Jesus returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis. And so he's in the far north again. Remember, if you know your ancient Israel geography, you got Galilee in the north, then Samaria in between, and Judea in the south. The Jordan River is off to to that side. All right, then you have the Mediterranean on this side, and up the Mediterranean, that's where you have Tyre and Sidon. They were Phoenician cities, and so not Israelites. And then they're going to the Decapolis. Those of you who understand Greek prefixes well will know deca, like a decathlon, means 10. Polis is city. So these 10 Greek cities that were established, in the time that the successors of Alexander the Great were ruling the region. So Jesus is there among the Gentiles, probably some Jewish people too, but some Gentiles. Now, my New Testament professor at St. Paul, Dr. Mark Schuler, he did some archaeological work on Hippos, one of the cities of the Decapolis. And he said that when Jesus talks about a city on a hill can't be hidden, it's probably talking about Hippos of the Decapolis, which is a pretty cool little tidbit there.
Yeah. So someday we may get up the technological know-how to put a map on this, so you can see that too. And so, but Paul did a good job of describing how that all fits together there. So right before this, what has happened is Jesus has encountered a woman there in, Mark calls her a Syro-Phoenician woman, so a Syrian Phoenician woman. And she, you can take a look at that. That's in verses 24 to 30, has incredible faith, even though Jesus seems to just push her away, keeps on trusting that Jesus will help her. And so what you're starting to see, and this is really cool, is that even outside of the nation of Israel, people are trusting Jesus and looking to him. She's just one example of that. And here we don't know the ethnicity of the people involved in this account here today before us, but it may very well be that they're Gentiles also.
It's pretty cool how a lot of times you have the Gentile women as the one who get it. Right? You have the Syrophoenician woman. In the Old Testament, you had Rahab being the one in Jericho who gets it. The Bible is really sneaky, Ruth, right? The Bible's sneaky about it, but there's a lot of places where the women have it a whole lot figured out better than the men do.
Most of the Gospels, that too. Well, let's go on. So Jesus is coming to this region, and here's what happens in verse 32, right? And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment, and they begged him to lay his hands on him, right? Okay, so you can see how those two things would be very closely connected.
Yeah.
Being deaf and having a speech impediment. This is quite common even today for people who have hearing problems, who have been, who've had this maybe from birth, and their speech isn't quite the same. And you might not know it just from looking at them, but then they open their mouth and you can tell. I mean, even with great speech therapists, which we have a lot of today, and they did not have 2,000 years ago, who are really able to help folks with hearing problems at any stage of life a whole lot. That we're not able to do it quite completely, too. So it was obvious from this guy's speech impediment that they had this other problem too. So they're bringing this guy to Jesus, and they beg Jesus to lay his hands on him. Now, this is really interesting because we know that in a lot of the Old Testament prophecies and a lot of the times when Jesus talks about what his work is going to entail, it talks about deaf people hearing. And this is actually the only account we have in the four Gospels of Jesus healing somebody, specifically healing somebody who is deaf.
Probably happened more than this.
In fact, there's another time where the guy who had a demon that made him be deaf, but here the specific problem is he's deaf, and that loss of hearing has led to a speech impediment, and so the whole thing is run there. And I mean, that's something that I think that we who have good hearing very much take for granted, but we know that a lot of people, I just look around my congregation and notice how many people are wearing hearing aids, and you can tell. I remember there was one guy a few years ago when we went to South Africa on a mission trip. We had one guy who had pretty bad hearing issue, and then I saw him again about a year later, and he'd gotten new hearing aids, and he said it was a whole new lease on life.
Wow.
A whole new, it just changed things for him completely. The way that he was able to relate to other people, especially his grandkids, it was just great. For those of us who don't have this issue with hearing, it's kind of something that we take for granted. But if you know someone who has a hearing issue, or you yourself have a hearing issue, you get what's going on here. You get how big a deal this is for this.
Yeah, and since we're talking about speech in there, and one of the questions, I read this for family devotions with my kids tonight, and one of the questions that my kids had was, well, how many languages did Jesus speak?
Well, you know the joke, right? What do you call somebody who's trilingual? Or somebody who speaks three languages?
What?
Trilingual. What do you call somebody who speaks two languages?
Bilingual.
What do you call somebody who speaks one language?
Oh, I bet it's American.
It's an American, yeah. So for us, speaking one language is probably outside the norm in the world even today. Jesus speaking two or even three, Hebrew or Aramaic, obviously because we have his Aramaic word here.
Yeah.
And
he's reading scripture, so Hebrew.
So reading scripture, Hebrew and Aramaic are pretty similar to each other. And nobody was, even at that point, nobody was really speaking Hebrew. It's all mostly in Aramaic. Greek, if you're going to work with people who aren't from your local community.
Yeah, Jesus is able to converse with Pilate pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Right. So maybe a little Latin here and there. That's probably our best guess. So we don't know exactly, but we do know that Jesus probably spoke. I probably spoke more than one.
Yeah, at least I think those three. But like you said, Hebrew wasn't much of a spoken language at that point.
No, and actually it hadn't been for a long time at that point. They came back from the Babylonian captivity, kind of speaking Aramaic, and kind of hung on to that then too. Let's see, the laying on of hands, which is what they ask him to do, and this is something that we've actually seen in a couple of the other parables. Like that was what Jairus asked Jesus to do a couple of weeks ago, and we had that back in I think it was Mark chapter 5. And that may relate to the ritual that's prescribed in Leviticus 14 for officially cleansing someone who had leprosy. And there, if you read it, it's really interesting. What you do is you take blood and oil from this sacrifice, and you put it on their right earlobe, on their right thumb, and on their right big toe.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you're, I guess, showing that from head to toe, you're clean, you're pure, in that way. Or at least that's what the indication was back in the book of Leviticus. So,
yeah,
that's what's going on here. Let's go on.
All right. And taking him aside from the crowd privately, he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue. My wife was wondering if Jesus had licked his fingers before he stuck them in the man's ear.
Yeah.
It looks like the fingers first, then the spit. So it's not quite a wet willy. But I love the fact that Jesus takes the guy away from the crowd. The crowd's like, "Hey, we want to see you heal this guy." And Jesus is like, "Okay, I'll heal him." And then I'll heal him over here, and it's, I think a lot of the times in these healings, like you even saw with the late woman who touched Jesus in the crowd, it's a very personal thing. Personal is not just you're not just going through the checkout, right? There's some real connection going on between Jesus when he heals someone and the other people in the Bible when they're healed too. And I think crowds can be an impediment to that connection.
And also, Jesus isn't doing this as a show.
No.
He's not a showman. He's not there to show off his healing. He's more concerned about this guy and making sure that he knows that this guy who is deaf knows his love, knows his care for him directly. It's very personal that he does this, and especially with someone who can't hear at all. That means a lot. I mean, he's not just lost in the crowd. Someone is right there for him, caring for him directly and specifically. He'd be able to tell that very, very easily.
Yeah, and he's touching, like you put in the notes, he's touching, the parts of his body that he's going to heal.
Right. Yeah. Touching his ears, touching his tongue, spitting. Now that's something that right there kind of makes us go, that's interesting that Jesus would do that, right? That he would spit.
That was Sophie's question. Why is he spitting?
Why is Jesus spitting? Well, Jesus did it 3 times when he did miracles. He used spit. This one in the next chapter, Jesus does it where he actually spits on a guy's eyelids in chapter 8. And then in John 9, remember where Jesus heals this guy who's blind at the pool of Siloam. He spits in the ground, makes mud with that, and then puts that mud on the guy's eyes, and then tells him to go wash in the pool, and then he's healed. So that's one that kind of comes up over and over again. And so apparently people in those days thought that there was some kind of healing property with spit, which is really weird because now it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's the
you gross all your germs on me, and but people then seem to think that had some kind of healing power. However, Jesus is showing us that it's not just this superstition about spitting or things like that. It's like if you watch the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the scene there where she's walking down the aisle and her whole family is spitting on her, and the groom's family is like, "That's disgusting." What is going on? But it actually comes from this, from Jesus spit, I guess. And so he's showing again that he's working on that part of the body then too. Greek loves onomatopoeia for words, and so the Greek word for to spit is patuo. So you can see how that would
patuo. That's a word to teach your kids right there.
Yeah. PTO, basically.
Patuo.
Yeah, patuo. Yeah. Um, so there we go. So there's the first part of Jesus taking him aside and putting his fingers in his ears, spitting, touching his tongue. Then we get to verse 34. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Epitha, that is, be opened.
So what's with the sigh here?
The sigh. Well, the first thing to see is looking up to heaven. So Jesus is showing him, okay, this is, by looking up to heaven, he's showing him this is God who's doing the work here. God is going to give you the healing. It's not that Jesus is some fancy smancy miracle worker or something like that. He's God who's come for you. And so then the sigh. And I think the best way to understand this is to show his deep care and concern for this guy is, I feel what you're going through. I feel this for you, and we're gonna do this. We're gonna fix this now. And then he says that word, Ephphatha, be opened. Aramaic word that it's one of those places. Like we had that a couple weeks ago again with Talitha Kumi. Jesus telling Jairus' daughter, little girl, I say to you, arise. And Mark gives us the actual words. And we talked about it then. Why does Mark give us the word that Jesus says directly in Aramaic, where everywhere else he gives us all of Jesus' other words in Greek? This must have been so memorable that stuck as part of it, a very important part of the story, the word that Jesus said, because when Jesus said it, it happened.
Yeah, and Peter, Peter's an old crusty fisherman. He's going to be a good storyteller. We're reading Mark is probably the story of Peter that Peter tells, and so I think I like that. It's gonna Ephphatha. It's gonna stick in your mind.
Yeah, it really did. It really must have done that for the folks who were there. Let's go on and see what happens then, as Jesus says this.
And his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. This is where it happens, and it happens fast. Tell me about what you found on the YouTube.
Okay, so if you want a good cry fest, if you want to just let it loose and you grab your box of Kleenex and you need a good cry, just go to YouTube right here and look for deaf people hearing sound for the first time. All kinds of videos of this from all over the world over the last years. A lot of kids who are getting hearing aids for the first time, or people who are having their cochlear implants that have been put in surgically turned on, and they're able to hear people for the first time. And oh man, I mean, people just coming to tears for being able to hear this. I mean, I really think videos like this are probably the closest we can get to seeing what the reaction must have been as Jesus did this. Because these are all things that are happening, in these videos, and it's wonderful that folks are able to do this. That we have doctors and audiologists who are skilled enough to really do a lot of good in helping people do this. But it's different from what Jesus is doing here, because it takes a lot of time. It takes surgery a lot of times. It takes devices that are wearing. With Jesus, nothing of that. Folks who go through this are probably going to have some kind of speech therapy or something, of that nature to help them, and probably have to help them be able to speak well. But this guy immediately, he's speaking plainly. The speech impediment is gone, and he's able to hear again, just completely. It's amazing. No wonder we get what we see later in this year.
Yeah, and this is healing a deaf person, healing and so they can speak plainly to the speech impediment. That's not a healing that can be faked.
It's an obvious miracle.
Yeah. No, one of the there's a documentary out right now on Netflix called American Gospel, where it's not done by Lutheran guys, but they do a pretty good job in the theology. It's not perfect, but I'd say a B+ job at least. And and one of the things they talk about is how, there are these faith healers who are
famous faith healers in American Christianity.
They're what?
Very famous faith healers in American Christianity.
Yeah, and they talk about how it's really kind of a scam. And this is not the type of thing that they're going to do. They're going to heal something that you can't tell has really been healed. Which is very sad, because people with very sick kids are going to these faith healers hoping that they can heal them, but they're not able to.
I think I've told you this, but just 4 miles down the road from us here is the birthplace of one of the original American faith healers. Her name was Catherine Kuhlman, and she was one of the first who would do these in like these big crusades, where she would have this arena full of people, and then just in the middle of her speaking call out like, someone's just been healed of cancer, or she wouldn't have people down in front of her. She would just call this out, and people would wonder, well, was it me? Was it?
Yeah.
So it's very, very different from what Jesus is doing here, and so we'll put a link to that in the description. You can check that out. There's I think it's an hour-long version on YouTube. They have the full 2-hour version on Netflix. It's definitely worth taking a look. But what's great here is that this is something that we can see clearly. This was supposed to happen when Jesus shows up. You even have it talked about in the Old Testament. Isaiah 35, 4 and 5, here's what it says. Say to those who have an anxious heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. With the recompense of God, he will come and save you. And the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped.
Yeah.
So this is like a preview of what's going to happen at the end of the world, when everyone who has any kind of problem that's come as a result of just the world being broken and sin in the world, that's going to be fixed. And everyone's going to be made new and perfect and whole when Jesus comes again.
All right, let's go to the next verse.
Yeah, let's. And Jesus charged them to tell no one, but the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it.
Which this is the thing that we see Jesus do multiple times.
Lots of times.
And there's different theories of why they think he's doing it, right? They either it's kind of reverse psychology.
Yeah, probably not that.
Probably not that, but Jesus has to get his whole message out before he goes to the cross, and these big healings, these big things that attract crowds, those are the things that upset the people who are going to try to put him on the cross.
They do. So, right, we've seen that already. It happened a bunch in Jewish communities where Jesus had said something like that. Even 2 weeks ago with Jairus' daughter was another example of this, where Jesus told him not, don't go do that. But it didn't really work, because you raise somebody from the dead. It's kind of a big deal. You heal somebody who can't speak well or hear, kind of a big deal. People are going to talk about that. You have the connection of, okay, so you didn't want the Jewish authorities to get involved too soon, and probably the Gentile authorities either doesn't want that to happen. The work that he did among the Jewish people kind of culminated with the feeding of the 5,000 that we had last week, and that was very public, right? I mean, no way you're going to get 5,000 people plus to not say anything about that. And Jesus is actually going to do the same thing in this same region a little bit later with feeding 4,000 people. And that, again, is something that's very big, very public. No way you're going to get that to do that. But after that, as kind of the theme of the gospel shifts a little bit, and Jesus more and more is looking towards the cross and knowing what's going to happen to him, you actually get fewer miracles.
Yeah, but because he's already got their attention.
He has there's a few scattered through there, but mostly it's focused on, here we're going to the cross, and this is what this means for us. And that Jesus is going to start teaching that, okay, this is what I'm here for, not just to fix miracles. It wasn't just like Jesus is like, well, okay, I had better, I've got 3 years here before I go die on the cross, so I might as well do something, some miracle. Yeah. It was a very important part of Jesus' ministry in showing the beginning of kind of the restoration of all things, of the deaf hearing and the blind seeing. But he doesn't want people to misunderstand what he's here for.
Yeah.
That he's here to die for us, to rise again for us. And that's what it means for him to be the Christ. That's what it means for him to be our Savior. And so that's what he's driving us towards.
Yeah. That's in the last verse here. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, He has done all things well. He makes even the deaf hear and the mute speak. It can't, like we said before, this can't be faked. Everyone knew this guy, and all of a sudden he can hear and talk. That's a big change.
He does all things well. This is like the high point of Jesus' popularity when people say this. From here, it's going to be downhill until eventually they start crying for his death and nail him to a cross. But here it is. And what they say again is absolutely right. He has done all things well. And we can say that for us too. Yeah, Jesus has accomplished everything that he set out for us. And he has done it, and done it perfectly, and done it great for us.
Yeah. So let's think about catechism connections.
Catechism connections, yes. So the big one here again is Jesus' identity, I think, in the second article of the Apostles' Creed. Who is Jesus? God and man. One of the books I really enjoy looking things up in is a book called The Two Natures in Christ by Martin Chemnitz. And he spends this whole book, and it's a long book, and he spends it all talking about how does this work that Jesus is God and man at the same time. And he uses this as an example to show how Jesus' divine characteristics carry through in his body. Right? So Jesus touches. I wish he didn't mention Jesus spitting, but I wish he would have done that. But Jesus, it's a human hand that touches this guy and heals him. So Jesus' body, even we can say, that's God. And that's cool. God has hands and feet like us. He sighs like us. He spits like us too. He's like us in every way. Jesus is. And in doing that, in being that way, he cares for us and saves us completely.
I think you got the first article too, right? I believe that God has made me and I'll create. He's giving me a body and full eyes, ears, and
all my members, and still takes care of them.
Yeah, and sin corrupts that, but it will be restored on the last day, and that's why we got to get that third article kicked into gear and proclaim the gospel.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, Paul, we can finish this in another half an hour if we have.
We did it.
We did it. Yeah. All right. So this is the end of kind of season 1 for us, and we're going to come back with something a little bit different next week because it's almost time for kids to be starting Christmas practice. So stay tuned.
We'll keep going.
Yeah, we'll keep going. Yeah, check in with us next week. We'll be back. We'll have something for you. Paul, thanks. We'll see you later.
All right.